Hey ladies and gents, welcome to another eFootball 2022 video. Today we're looking at my controller settings. So you could consider them the best, I consider them the best because they are my controller settings that suit me the best. And I'm going to explain why I've chosen the things I have. So if you just go across the extras, go to game settings, controller, config 1, that will take you to your controller settings. Now I'm going to run through the basic controls and then we'll go into the detailed settings of my controller and why I chose the things I have. So starting off with R1 is the special controls and L1 is the custom change. Now let me explain this from another perspective. You want to keep R2 as dash. Why do I say that? Because in 0.9.0 and 0.9.1 this was set and used as an adaptive trigger. What I mean by that is, like, if you pressed it a little bit it was a fast walk, if you pressed it a little bit more it was a jog, if you pressed it like full all the way down it was a full-on sprint. They did actually remove that feedback from version 1. So it doesn't matter how much you press it in version 1, it doesn't have that impact. But I know for a fact the reason they've kept this as R2 right now as the default controls is because they will be bringing that back in the future editions from what I've heard at Konami. So just be sure to leave R2 as dash, adapt to it, get used to it. And that is the reason why special controls are on R1. Or the adaptive feedback is also related to the shield button as L2. So depending how much you depress it, it determines how much you shield the ball. So if you push it a little bit, you can just fend off the defender but stay relatively close to the ball. If you push it all the way down, you're going to like really disconnect from the ball and that ball's going to become separate from your player if he's shielding the ball. So it does depend on how much you push that down, even in version 1. So be sure to leave L2 and R2 as dash and shield. Very, very high recommendation that, because I know what's coming. I know how the game's going to be developed in that way, because that's the advice they gave me at the HQ. So be sure to keep those on those buttons. Just learn and adapt them if you've been used to R1 as your sprint, which you probably a lot of you have. When it comes to the other buttons, now I did play PES 2014, which was absolutely awful, and I migrated to FIFA 14 at the time, so I had to get used to the shooting the pass or lofted pass buttons being the wrong way around, and that's why they're still the wrong way around here, or they're the wrong way around in PES now. So you know, my shoot button is my circle and my lofted pass is my square. Now if I look at the defensive side of things, everything else is pretty standard there. Pass is X and through ball is triangle. If we move to defensive settings, you'll notice that the dash and matchup buttons are set to these two here. I find that matchup button is very intuitive being on the left trigger. When I'm dashing and using the matchup, like switching just feels really comfortable, really natural. Dash has to be R2, so that means my call for pressure has to be R1. As for cursor change, that leaves L1, which is pretty standard. Goalkeeper running towards the ball is triangle. Yep, that's the same. Obviously I switched the standing tackle and the slide tackle buttons around. The reason for this, because I changed my shoot and my lofted pass around, I had to change these around. Otherwise I would go for a shot, their player intercepts the shot or blocks it or gets in the way, and then slide tackling, wiping them out and probably getting cards left, right and center, which used to happen. So that's why I switched those two around, and pressure is my X button. So those are pretty standard, to be fair, but it's just the importance of having dash and shield on the left trigger and right triggers. Going to the detailed settings now. So cursor change, I've left as assisted. I find the selection really, really strong in this game. And I'm going to tell you why I leave it as assisted. Assisted, the cursor will switch between the players automatically. You can override this setting manually if you wish. So you can still have control of your players. You can still select using left bumper and your analog stick. And the reason I use assisted over semi-assisted is because of the stunning cross. I find that on semi-assisted, you can see here, when attacking, the cursor will switch automatically. Fine. But when defending, it's generally switched manually. And if you're trying to deal with stunning crosses coming in at 100 miles an hour from the likes of Roberto Carlos, like trying to select the right defender in that moment is very, very difficult. And the player switching in this game is probably the best it's ever been, in my opinion. As for unassisted, I would avoid that like the plague. But again, it's down to personal preference. I know there's some players out there like semi-assisted, but for the stunning cross, if you're trying to deal with that on semi-assisted, I think it's very difficult if you've got a number of players in the box. and assisted does a really good job of clearing the ball. To be honest, you do have if you are on semi-assisted, the one thing I will say is if you haven't got the right player selected, the defenders will still deal with that cross. So it's not like they will just leave the ball entirely. So it's like the same when you select the goalkeeper. If you select the goalkeeper, the defense will clear the ball as quickly as they can if it comes to them. So you're not totally unprotected on a semi-assist. The defense will deal with it, but I prefer much to have that control and greater control of where the ball is going to go. For instance, the ball comes in, you head the ball clear, your player's automatically selected for you, then you're just determining where you want to clear the ball with your left analytic. If you've got semi-assisted and the AI cleared the ball for you, it's just going straight out to the edge of the penalty box, and they're going to probably have a stunning shot set up, or they could pass the ball back around. So it's very important. That's why I leave mine as assisted, but it's entirely up to you. Cursor type, I leave this as off. So choose whether or not to display cursors above the players' heads during the matches. If you want the player names, so if you want to see Gabriel Batistuta on the ball for your opponent, I really don't care about this, to be honest. I just leave mine off. I certainly wouldn't have a controller number or online ID or username. I just think it looks much more pleasing for those watching the game to have this switched off. Manual cursor change type. So I've got this set to player orientated. And what this means is this determines how you select players when you're defending and you haven't got the ball and you want to use right stick to select a player. Ball orientation means you're selecting the player from the ball, which in my opinion is far worse than player orientation. And the reason I say that is because, say for instance, I've got a midfielder and I want to select the defender. That's a much quicker flick. If I want to track a runner going through the middle, if I want to track someone who's playing, that cheesy ball from kickoff right down the middle, you can quickly select your defender much quicker with player orientation. With ball orientation, it means I have to hold it down quite a while to select my defender right at the back if I'm trying to cover that run. And this is why I select player orientation. It just means that I'm selecting players from the player that I have selected with the right analog stick. I just think ball orientation means that the closest player will always be selected anyway. I don't need that. So player orientation is my preferred method. When it comes to manual pass level, we've got level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. So level 1 is the most assisted in eFootball 2022, whereas in PES 21, everyone was pretty much on level 3. So the default, everyone is thrown on. If you create a brand new account, you're thrown on pass support level 1. I would highly recommend going to level 2. And the reason I say this is because if you go to level 3, which is equivalent to PA1 on PES 21, you're already at a disadvantage. And it's very noticeable when you're playing against players who are on level 1 and you've got a similar rated team. You see the laser guidedness. With level 1, I just don't feel like I had that added control. I couldn't really do short passes. The ball seemed to be going too far. Everything was predetermined, so you didn't really have a control of who the ball was really going to, but you did have that laser accuracy. Whereas with level 3, I had more control, but I lost the precision. So level 2, I feel like you get the precision and you regain a lot of control. It's not perfect, but it's probably the best of both worlds, in my opinion. If you're trying to compete, then level 2 is probably where I'd recommend just having that additional control over your passes, your pass length. And yeah, with level 3, I just found that I was too disadvantaged against level 1 players. So level 2 is where I found a nice balance. If you watched my 7-hour stream, I was actually on level 2 the whole time, and I didn't even know until towards the end of my stream, and it just seemed to work really, really well for me. Level 4 is obviously manual, and if you are a manual player, then this is the mode you want, or the pass level you want to select. So be sure to go for that. The one thing I would say about manual passing, coming up against manual players, it's really annoying because when the ball's played manually, your players react differently to the ball. Obviously it's harder to learn manual passing, but if you can master it, it can really confuse and disorientate those on, well, when you're defending it just seems much harder to deal with. Your players react differently to the ball being passed. That's the one thing I would say. So if you can't master manual controls, it can be very, very frustrating to sort of deal with and defend against. When it comes to tackle type, I leave this as shoulder charge. I'm just so used to pressing circle now to use shoulder charge and double tapping X for my standing tackle. But again, it's down to personal preference. A lot of people are still going to be used to pressing circle for tackle button or your standing tackle. But I'm happy to double tap X as my standing tackle. Shot type, I leave as basic. You've got the choice of manual or basic. Again, if you're playing AI, you're probably going to play manual, but if you really want to compete at the highest level, I think I'll leave that as basic. Direction guide. So this is whether you have a circle underneath your player or not. Obviously, I'm going to leave that off because I think it looks absolutely horrendous when it's on. I don't know why it's on by default. It just doesn't make any sense. Maybe for mobile players, who knows. Next player indicator. This indicates who your next player will be selected. They have like a very grey transparent triangle above the player's head to indicate if you were to press your LB, your player select button, who would be selected next. So I leave that as on. That's very important. And also important to determine whether you need to use the right analog stick to select another player if that player hasn't got the next player indicator above his head that you want selected. The target guide I've set to off. So this is, I know a lot of pro players that leave this on. So when you're using the right analog stick to select your players, you'll see these lines come up on the pitch. I don't think that looks great when you're doing live commentary and you see these lines being flicking across the pitch. It doesn't look very good in my opinion. So I leave that off. And then think command type, I leave to easy. This basically just makes a lot of the skills more responsive and easier to perform. Doesn't means you don't have to like rotate the analog sticks or anything crazy like that. You don't have to like rotate it 180 degrees to do one move. Therefore, the skills are generally more responsive. So those are my controls, ladies and gents. Hopefully you guys found this video useful. If it's helped you in any way, shape or form, let me know down in the comments. Let me know down in the comments as well your settings, any changes you'd make to this setup, and what's your pass assistant settings, because there's obviously going to be a lot of disputes on here. But I think if you're playing online competitively, I think PA2 is the way to go, or level 2. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.